And this is part 3 of your essay tutorials. And today I'm going to be, or in this tutorial I should say, I'm going to be focusing on your pre-write, which is resource number 4. Before I start my tutorial over that graphic organizer, I wanted to do a quick follow-up on the previous tutorial about the quality of evidence. This essay that you're looking at, this is actually the same one that was on your resource packet at the very front of the packet, resource number 1. And I wanted to make a quick point here. These 2 paragraphs are the writer's first 2 body paragraphs. And the first paragraph is particularly focusing on the Pew Research article, one of them, and the data from that. And she's also pulling out factual information from a different article about migrant farm laborers and their lack of acceptance in rural Californian communities. So the point here is that this data is, or this evidence I should say, is data-driven and factual, right? And then her next paragraph, she uses a poem, Let America Be America Again, and she pairs it with the photo that we studied together in class a couple of weeks ago. And the way that I showed it to you, it was titled At the Time of the Louisville Flood, but she entitles it The American Way. And so while all of your data or all of your evidence does not have to be data-driven and factual, it is important at least that you have a balance between the 2 types of sources. If you're always quoting poems for your persuasive argument, then that's just not enough fact. And so you want to make sure that your argument is grounded in reality, and that's what we see and that's what we understand as we read her argument. So take a look at that on your own time, but she does a really good job of balancing the sources. With that said, let's move on to our next piece, which is the pre-write. And so just a really quick explanation of the pre-write. We call it pre-PRE. It stands for position, which is your thesis claim, which all can be used in replacement or in synonymously with each other. Reasons, which is the R. These reasons are your arguments or your topic sentences. And examples, which is your evidence. And so what we see here is you write your thesis in this section. You break up your thesis into different topics, and those become your topic sentences. And then, of course, you find evidence that proves what your topic sentences are trying to say, and you write it here. So let's go back to this evidence-based thesis that we talked about a couple of videos ago. We were able to narrow down our topic to one thesis based upon some evidence that helped us discuss our point of view, which was that we do not agree that juveniles should be sentenced to life in prison. So the position or the thesis that we came up with was this: it is unethical to sentence juveniles to life in prison because physically they are not yet adults, and the likelihood of rehabilitation is too high not to offer them a second chance at life outside of prison. So now that we have our thesis, we take our thesis and we plunk it right onto this graphic organizer. And it's exactly the same thesis that I just read to you all. But this is what needs to happen now. You need to take the thesis and you need to divide it into 2 pieces. And so piece number 1 is going to go here. Piece number 2 is going to go here. Don't worry about here yet. I'll show you what to do. But essentially, we're dividing it into 2 subtopics so that we can argue them more easily. So if we look at this thesis, we actually see that it's pretty clearly divided into 2 parts. Part number 1 is talking about the biological and physical development of the brain and trying to prove that juveniles are not adults, so they shouldn't be treated as such in a court of law. So if we actually take that first topic, we can put it right here, and that'll be our first topic or first argument. Now, the other part of this is trying to talk about how juveniles are really good candidates for rehabilitation and that they can change more easily than adults. And so we could take this and we make that into our second topic sentence. And so this would be the topic for paragraph 1, and then this for paragraph 2. Now that we have these two subtopics and two arguments, our next job is to find evidence that is going to prove what this is saying. And I already talked about a couple of sources in the evidence-based argument, but I'm going to pull some out that you might not have seen before. So the first piece of evidence is from The Teen Brain Still Under Construction, and it talks about how the brain does not reach full maturity until a person has reached their early 20s. And so notice this is not an exact quote, but it is a fact. That would be a really good one in proving what I'm trying to say here. The second piece of evidence is from the same article, and this is the piece of evidence that you all have seen before. The part of the brain that is in charge of impulse control is not fully developed in the teen years. And so the point being that it's a lot harder, especially when a child is under emotional distress or a juvenile is under emotional distress, to control their actions. And so both of these would really help me prove this point. Now, for my second point, juveniles are so young, their ability to change and turn their lives around is much greater than adults. We could take a piece of evidence from an article already mentioned. Again, I'm not quoting a whole chunk of quote, but I did take this particular piece out. She says, juvenile court judge Gail Geringer has seen firsthand the, quote, enormous capacity of children to change. And so this would be a great piece of evidence to prove this point. Now let me stop here for a moment and say, some of you are ready to use multiple pieces of evidence in your TIAC body paragraphs. Some of you are not. If you were in my honors class, definitely you should use 2 pieces of evidence, okay? But some of you are not quite ready for that yet, and that's totally fine. So I would expect that in your TIAC paragraphs, of course, you have at least 1 solid piece of evidence to help prove your point, okay? Now, let's go on and talk about this last section. When you are doing an argumentative essay, one of the most effective ways that you can argue and prove your point is to anticipate what people who disagree with you might say, or anticipate the opposers. And so you want to think to yourself, what is something somebody would say to argue against me? Okay? But then I want you to say, in opposition to that, why is that person wrong? Okay? So again, what would somebody say who disagrees with my argument? And then what could I say to prove them wrong? Okay, this is going to make your argument even more persuasive. So here's an example. An opposing claim would be, many argue that the crime itself should determine the punishment. So the point here is that the age has nothing to do with the punishment, but the crime is the only thing that people should consider. That is what an opposing claim could sound like that opposes my main argument. Now, here's my counter argument. In the case of juvenile crime, that rule should be thrown out. And of course, the point being here that the person who committed the crime is a juvenile, and there are so many factors that should get in the way of saying this kid is bad, put the person in jail forever. Okay? And so I have not put evidence down here just because I think you guys are getting the idea. But of course, whatever evidence you have, okay, you don't want to reuse that evidence. You want to pull out new evidence that helps you point to and prove this claim or counter argument. That in the case of juvenile crime, that rule should be thrown out. So evidence here to prove this point right here. Okay? So this is what I need you guys to do after going through the whole pre-write process. First, Using your evidence-based thesis, resource number 3, you want to copy your thesis to the pre-write graphic organizer, just like I did at the top of the pre-write before. Then split your thesis into 2 claims. So 2 topic sentences. Here is part A of my thesis, here is part B of my thesis. Moving on. For each claim, you want to find 1 to 2 pieces of evidence that help you prove your claim. Again, your claim is your topic sentence, which is part A or B of your thesis statement. Then you want to move to the right side of that graphic organizer and complete the opposing claim and counter argument section. Again, opposing claim is, what would somebody say who disagrees with my thesis, and how could I prove them wrong? Then, of course, you want to find additional, not the same evidence, but additional evidence to support your counter argument. And what I need you all to do is to fill this worksheet out completely. I want you to, as before, snap a photo of it, and I want you to upload it to the corresponding Schoology assignment. It should say something like American Dream essay pre-write. And so you want to take a very clear picture, upload it to that assignment, and that will be your work for the day. Of course, let me know if you have any questions. I'm here to answer them.